Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. Today has been a great day. I'm recording this on the 7th. I went to a new church site and recorded there for my other channel called Explore Church Sites. And I did some research for this area. This is the old Independence Landing. This is where the Saints crossed the Missouri River north into Clay County to escape persecution as they were being driven out of Jackson County. This is a very little known site, and I discovered some really interesting things. The way that it happened, I didn't plan it out this way, but some interesting things happened. So I'm going to put this video up on my other channel. It's probably going to be up sometime next week. But as I was researching this site, I came across a journal or an autobiography of Emily Partridge, the youngest daughter of Edward Partridge. And she was here at this site, but later on, she ended up in Far West and tells a really interesting story that I think that we could all benefit from when it comes to signs. As you know, most of my channel is about looking for different signs and potential fulfillment of prophecies and looking for unusual things. I think all these different ways that the Lord is communicating with his children to prepare them for the second coming. And she gives a really, really good example of the type of things to look for. I feel like what I'm about to share with you, validates all of us that see these signs that other people dismiss as coincidence. So yeah, I found the story for that other video. I read that in the other video. I wanted to see if she had anything else to say. I was actually looking for anything that she might have to say about Adam. I don't know. I didn't know if she had ended up there or not. She didn't, but she does tell this really interesting story about Far West. So take a look at this. So this is the church history catalog. The name of this document is Incidents of the Life of a Mormon Girl, and it's undated. Okay. And this is on page 44 of the document, but in the church history catalog, it's 87. Okay. After the town of Far West was laid out, Father built another log cabin and we moved into the city. The saints from all parts of the world where the gospel had been preached began to gather in, and the place was rapidly built up. Let me pause right here. I've heard it said that Far West is actually the first time that the entire church was all together in one place. And not just strictly Far West, but the surrounding area, including Adam and all that. But at one time, this was headquarters of the church. All right, continuing. Trouble in Kirtland multiplied until the saints in that place had to flee to Missouri, and the saints in the West had the prophet for the first time living in their midst, which they esteemed as a great blessing. As usual, schools were started. I attended one by Miss Nancy Carl, the same that taught school in Jackson County. The saints continued to take up land and settle in the surrounding counties, and peace and prosperity reigned in their midst. Now, here we go. This is why I'm making this video, is this part right here. Now, think about this as we think about the state of the nation, as we think about the government shutdown, which last I checked, again, I'm recording this on the 7th. I haven't seen any news that it's ended. Think about this as we think about all the political chaos and division and the horrible events that we saw in September, especially the one after President Nelson's birthday on September 10th at Utah Valley University. Think about all that as I read this. On the 4th of July, 1838, the saints assembled in Far West to celebrate the day. And I think the spot for the temple was that day dedicated. And she's correct. It was the Cornerstones I think it's the cornerstones were laid on that day. I should have kept that up. Okay. Our national flag, the stars and stripes attached to the Liberty Pole, floated gaily in the breeze. And that's interesting because when you go to Far West, by the way, make sure to subscribe to my other channel, Explore Church Sites. I'm discovering amazing things, and I'm doing a lot of research and finding very interesting stories about these locations. But here's my video, or one of my videos that I did at Far West, and this would be like the front of the temple if it was constructed. This is the east side, and you have the three monoliths that's currently there. And to the left, you have the American flag. And for some reason, that always just caught my attention. I don't know if they decided to do that because there was a flagpole at this site when the Saints were first here. I wouldn't be surprised if President Alvin R. Dyer, being so familiar with the history of Missouri, because he was part of these different Missouri historical societies, I wouldn't be surprised if when he was given the assignment to beautify the Far West Temple site, if he decided to include that in the beautification. Because as far as I know, I don't think there's any American flags at Adamantiaman. You don't have a flag at Hawn's Mill. The Independence Visitor Center, I'm not sure. I don't think that there's a flag there. So you have a flag here at Far West. There it is. And it might be because of this story that we're reading right now. It might be a nod to what happened in July of 1838. Okay, so all were happy and joyful, as none but saints know how to be. Shortly after the 4th, so not on the 4th, but shortly after, a terrible storm arose. The thunder and lightning were terrific. The Liberty Pole was struck and shattered by a bolt of lightning, foreshadowing coming events, as the sequel proved. You guys, that is a sign. And undoubtedly, there would be members of the church back then that would be like, oh, that's just a coincidence. Of course, lightning hits, tall things like flagpoles. It's nothing out of the ordinary. It's not magical. It's not supernatural. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. It just has to call your attention. It just has to make you wonder and cause awe and communicate some kind of idea to your mind. So in this case, it's not too hard to put together. You have a symbol of the United States. In the United States, we know from different statements of prophets and apostles and general authorities that in the scriptures, that the United States was created so that the church could be reestablished. That's the primary purpose of the United States, is to guarantee religious freedom. And here we are in this part of church history in Missouri when the saints were trying to live their religion, but they couldn't because of all the persecution, and not just from just everyday Missourians, although they were definitely part of the trouble, but from the actual government itself, all the way up to the state level, with which culminated with the extermination order just a few months after this, signed by Governor Lilburn Boggs. So you have this. They were setting up shop in Far West. It was church headquarters. They were planning on building a temple there. Far West was identified as a consecrated land. The name of the church was revealed at Far West. The law of tithing was revealed there. It's a holy place. So 4th of July, the symbol of the United States. The American flag on the flagpole as a symbol of the United States. Lightning strikes. Who has control of lightning? Not us. And then a few months later, you have just everything that ensued. The final chapters, or really the final pages of church history in Missouri, and the final expulsion. You get it? So She correctly interpreted this as a sign. And it does seem like the message got through, and it's not like you suddenly understand exactly what's going to happen, and that may not be the point of a sign. But when we look at it with 2020 vision, we can see, wow, okay, the Lord really is in control, and he knew what was about to happen, and he made his feelings known uh, toward the United States, toward Missouri, the government, as well as the saints. You know, of course, he was displeased with the wickedness that was persecuting the saints. And we know that about 30 years later, that's when we had the Civil War. Joseph Smith prophesied that Missouri would pay for what they did, that they would have to, atone for the blood of the saints, that they'd have to pay for it. And it came in the form of the Civil War. Okay, so shortly after the 4th, a terrible storm arose. The thunder and lightning were terrific. The Liberty Pole was struck and shattered by a bolt of lightning, foreshadowing coming events, as the sequel proved. Not long after this, runners came to Far West from different settlements of threats and depredations being committed by small parties of Missourians. There was trouble in, this should be Davies. This is incorrectly spelled, but there was trouble in Davies County. A battle was fought on Crooked River, and Brother David Patton, one of the 12, was killed. Some others of the brethren were slain. Just so you know, you can actually go visit this site, not the entire area, but thankfully the Far West Stake has put up this historical marker. And with all these videos that I do, if you go to the description box, it has the address as well as the coordinates, so you can know exactly how to get there. David W. Patton, essentially he was the first apostolic martyr in this dispensation. Okay, back to this. Okay, just skip a couple pages because the one in between is blank. Then came the news of the terrible massacre at Hawn's Mill. And by the way, I have videos for that too. I just want you to know, I have these resources for you. If you can't come here to Missouri, I'm making all these videos. And I'm coming back to these sites over and over again. And I'm trying to have new information each time I come to one of them, a new story, a new quote, or some new fact. So if you haven't been here, you don't think you'll be able to come here, or you've been here, but you want to see it again, I have this for you as a resource. So here's Hawn's Mill. And you may not know that I don't know if there was just one millstone, but at least one of the millstones from Hawn's Mill was moved to a town called Breckenridge, not too far away. And it's in the city park. And there's this memorial to what happened at Hawn's Mill. So that's a special place too. And before we were hardly aware of it, a large party of the mob were marching to Far West with an exterminating order from the governor. The brethren hastily got together all the wagons, boards, and whatever they could find, what would do, and began to throw up a breastwork to protect themselves in a measure from the bullets of the murderous mob. But through the cowardice and treachery of George M. Hinkle, a colonel in the Mormon militia, the prophet and several of his brethren were betrayed into the hands of the mob. You always have these characters, don't you? Even today, people that turn against the church and throw the prophet and first presidency and apostles under the bus because of cowardice or pride, narcissism, trying to save face. You always have these characters. Okay, so I think that's a pretty incredible story. And I feel like that's one of the purposes of my channel. I'm doing the best that I can to collect not just signs that were recognized in church history, but signs that are happening right now. I'm trying to collect it and put it all together. That's why I have these timelines like this one. This is called Signs Church Specific. By the way, You can access my spreadsheets anytime. The link is in the description box of each video. So I've added this to church-specific signs. Undoubtedly, there's many, 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 many more to find. So I put this story that we just read on here, and there've been so many signs, you guys, and I feel like some of them are just so obvious. Look at this. Last year, Pioneer Day, there was a fire behind Ensign Peak. Ensign Peak was an important aspect of Pioneer Day because Brigham Young had seen that in vision. That's how he knew that this was the place, the Salt Lake Valley. So you have a fire behind Ensign Peak on Pioneer Day. And it just so happens that's the same day. Sorry, I'll zoom in. It just so happens that's the same day that, the Olympic Committee announced that the Winter Olympics would return to Salt Lake City, and therefore bring all these people into the Salt Lake Valley. You can't tell me that's not a sign, right? More recently, we've talked about the stuff that happened. One major thing happened the day after President Nelson's 101st birthday, and it was a very troubling event. Definitely persecution and attack. And then the day after President Nelson passed away, another one, but this one specifically targeted at the church. This one happened in Michigan. You can't tell me that these aren't signs. You can't. So we got church-specific signs. We got this spreadsheet for lightning, because I have all these different disasters, calamities, natural phenomena that I'm tracking. And one of them is lightning. And we've seen a lot of really interesting lightning events. One that just recently blew my mind away is they finally, went through all the data, did whatever they needed to do to determine that the mega flash that occurred on October 22nd of 2017, just a few months before President Nelson became president of the church, that mega flash is now officially the longest single horizontal lightning flash at 515 miles. And guess what? I'm not going to pull up the map right now, but it stretches from Independence. That's like the kind of like the starting point. Independence all the way down to Texas. You can't tell me that that's not a sign. But there's been a lot of other ones. We got this one. This is, and I want to kind of like focus on this one because this more has to do with the theme of this video. We got this one called Signs United States. These are United States specific signs, or what I interpret to be United States specific signs. And I actually want to show you some of these articles. We've already gone through these before, but it starts like this in my mind. And obviously there's stuff that would come before this, but this is what I have so far. The first thing I want to share, August 14th, 2022, President Nelson rededicates the Washington, D.C. temple. We recently spoke about this. You had the recent worldwide devotional for young adults that took place here, which I think was significant. But just go watch that video in case you missed it. But I think that was a hinge point of sorts. Then later that year, November 8th, we have the nation's first ever election day blood moon, or total lunar eclipse. These were the national elections before the next ones in 2024. That the ones in 2024 were for the presidency. Okay, so a blood moon before that is probably not a good sign. It hasn't happened before in United States history. This is the first time. Election day, and it's the election before the presidential elections. I'll move that over. Let's see, what else have we got? you might remember the Francis Scott Key Bridge um, collapse. That was a result of a cargo ship that rammed into it. And this was in Baltimore, which is not far from Washington, D.C. Oh, and I meant to pull this up. But after this happened in the April 2024 General Conference, Elder Stevenson brought it up because before this took place, he already had his talk written out, and it was all about bridges. And he brings that up in his talk. He's like, I didn't know that there was going to be this disaster in Baltimore, so, I'm including this in my talk. This was already written out. And by the way, Francis Scott Key, he's the one that wrote the American National Anthem. So it's really close to Washington, D.C. It's named after the man that wrote the American National Anthem. It happened a day after the Kirtland Temple reopened. Let's go to here's this. This is some of the imagery from a map. Okay. Let's see. And then April 3rd, there was a lightning bolt that struck the Statue of Liberty. And I know that some of you are rolling your eyes. It's like, oh, lightning strikes the Statue of Liberty all the time. Well, you know what doesn't happen all the time? Getting a picture of it. And that's what delivers the message, is when you have a dramatic looking picture like this, it puts thoughts and images into people's minds, especially when it happens on a special day or it coincides with something else. It doesn't have to be unexplainable. It doesn't have to be something that never happens. There just has to be something about it that calls your attention to it and could relay some kind of meaning. So in this case, the Statue of Liberty is a symbol of the United States and liberty and freedom. And somebody on that day just happened to capture a pretty dramatic picture of it. But so let's see, significant day, 3 days before General Conference, 188th anniversary of the appearance of Christ, Moses, Elijah, Elias in the Kirtland Temple. So on the anniversary of that very important day in church history, the restoration of the priesthood keys. And then 2 days later, a day before General Conference, again, back at the Statue of Liberty, a rare 4.8 magnitude earthquake near White House Station, interesting name, New Jersey, fell to New York City and shakes the Statue of Liberty. So that was a pretty eventful couple days for the Statue of Liberty. And there's video here. You can see the shaking if you play this video. So the more unlikely it is, or the more coincidental it is, the more likely it is a sign. And, we always want to know, well, so what happened, or what does it mean? Sometimes you're not going to know what happens until later on. You just take note of it and you move on. You might be able to get a sense, if we have lightning hitting the Statue of Liberty and we have an earthquake that shakes it, that's probably not a good sign. In the case of Far West, in lightning shattering the flagpole, it turned out that was a sign of bad things to come. Okay. May 31st of last year, we had the conviction of Donald Trump. Let's see right here. That's not a good thing to happen. It's aside from it being some kind of like supernatural happening, it's just a bad sign for the country and the politics right now. And, our country should be very stable. Ideally, it should be a stable place. You shouldn't have things like this happen. I don't want to go into the whole debate about whether this should have happened or shouldn't have happened. I don't want this become political, but I think everyone can agree that it's not what anybody wants for the United States to have something like this happen. Just a few days later, which happened to be Jerusalem Day, rare tornadoes sweep through the Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia regions. This is the first time the local office of the National Weather Service has ever issued a particularly dangerous situation, or PDS, tornado warning for Montgomery County. So, um, a lot of stuff going on around um, these places that are significant to the United States and symbols of the United States. Washington, D.C., this has never happened. Statue of Liberty, lightning and an earthquake. Former president convicted. Yeah, and then this one is almost just, it's just comical, and hopefully that, this is just coincidence. But this is in Washington, D.C., June 22nd. And this one, this one, this one is just a little bit dramatic. You had this wax sculpture that was set up at like a school, and because of the heat, it caused this to happen. And I did a whole video about it, how this shouldn't have happened, the way that it was constructed and whatever was mixed in with the wax. It shouldn't have happened. And the person that sculpted it said that, yeah, there's a higher power that wants this to happen. And they fixed it a time or two, and then it still happened. And you think about President Lincoln and how his life ended, and, also him being the president, you could say, of the Civil War, and we see this like civil war right now in our country, at least when it comes to politics and social issues and arguing and debates and stuff like that. So again, probably not a good sign. In Utah, this was on the 4th of July. There was a fireworks show at BYU's LaVelle Edwards Stadium, and there was a major malfunction of the fireworks. These fireworks went crazy. They flew into the audience, and it was chaotic. And again, people would be like, "Oh, you're just looking too much into it." If there was somebody in that stadium that interpreted that as a sign, they're there to celebrate the 4th of July. They're having a good time. They're thinking about the state of the country. And then you have this crazy thing happen. It doesn't matter if it would affect you in this way. If it affected anybody that was there and it made them stop and think, then mission accomplished. Mission accomplished. And when I did this video, we talked about the fact that this hasn't happened before. There are people who have been like, I've never seen this before. I've been coming to this show, for whatever, like 15, 20 years, something like that. This has never happened. Okay. It doesn't hurt just to take note of it. And then of course we had this day. This came as a shock. And let me just speed through the rest of these. Here we are, the Statue of Liberty again. Rare daylight fireball meteor over New York City created loud boom near Statue of Liberty. So the Statue of Liberty was really seeing a lot of action in 2024. And guess what 2024 was? It was an election year. Here we are at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, and it was really dismal and depressing. And then you had these kooky protesters with their nonsense disrupting the parade. I did that video. I remember people just saying that it was just such a depressing parade, and it shouldn't have been. And then finally, on New Year's Eve, as we're going into the new year, Capitol/Washington Monument, Capitol Washington Monument, Empire State Building, hit by lightning on New Year's Eve. Message from God. This is on Israel 365 News. It's unlikely. Again, the thing that makes it unlikely is that they were all caught on camera. And so that's all that it needs to be. I understand. Lightning hits tall structures. I know it hits these buildings, however many times a year, 5, 10, 15 times a year. It doesn't matter. It happened on the same day. It was caught on camera. And it's something that human beings with souls can see, and then a message can be relayed through that. That's all. Okay, massive winter storm moves east. DC faces rare snow emergency after record snowfall. Oh yeah, we had this. This is CBN, Christian Broadcasting Network. You had the Golden Globes, and this personality, whoever she is, Nikki Glasser, she made a really disrespectful joke about God. Okay, this was in Los Angeles. And I think it was on that same day. Let's just double check this one. I think it was on that same day. Where is it? Yeah, right here. Yeah, that's the same day that the Los Angeles fires broke out, starting in Pacific Palisades. So as you have this mockery of God at the Golden Globes, where'd it go? That's the same day that the Los Angeles fires started. And that was no small event. And then Inauguration Day, it was held inside because it was so cold. Temperatures were the lowest since 1985 with President Reagan. And then, you know, the sun will occasionally develop these large coronal holes. That's nothing unusual. They look pretty dramatic, but, you know, I've captured a number of these on my spreadsheets and realized, oh yeah, these happen every, you know, probably like, I don't know, every 3 years or something like that, maybe even more frequently. It's nothing too unusual. But this time, you know, in 2025, we had this one that looked like the United States. Just look at it closely. Let's zoom in. I've had people say, oh, I don't see it. Have you seen a map? Go look at a map. Go look at a map of the United States. This is Florida. Up here is Maine. And, you know, Vermont, New Hampshire. Okay. You recognize like this, the United States kind of comes up like this, and then it goes down like this. Here's Texas right here. Here's California. And yes, this part's kind of exaggerated, but you could think of this as like extending out to Alaska. And you could include Canada in here as well, maybe. This looks like the Great Lakes area right here in Minnesota. Whatever, you don't have to agree, but it happened. You know, whether this looks like it to you or not, I don't know, but I think it does. And to me, that happened. And then we've already talked about this. This is the most recent thing on that spreadsheet. So, far west, Flagpole, hit by lightning, and a lot of bad things ensued. We have a lot of this kind of stuff going on. I just showed you like a million things, and I haven't captured it all, I'm sure. But this is why I take note of these things. And again, I don't know exactly what they mean. You can kind of get a sense, I think. But I feel like it's not the same as, you know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. It feels like everything is just like really kicked into gear, into a higher gear. And we're seeing more and more record-breaking events and unusual things and alarming indications of how the world is just like descending more and more into chaos. So, okay, well, anyway, that's gonna be for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.